We have been looking at these different series on Sunday night, and as I was thinking about tonight, I kind of covered the ground I wanted to this month as far as the night service. We got a little bit further than I intended, but we had missed a lesson last month, so I was like, well, we could kind of review and do that, or we could sneak in that message we left last month. So that's what we're going to try to do. We were talking about holiness last month, and we were going to look at this idea of the pursuit of happiness in light of the idea of holiness. So I figured that's what we'll do tonight. We'll spend some time thinking about this idea and this concept. I think everybody wants to be happy. I think that's a pretty common thought and something that is easy to grab a hold of. But it's more complicated, I think, than we kind of on the surface give credit to. And we'll explain a little bit about that as we go. But I do think that God gives us a path to real or true or meaningful happiness, not just temporary happiness. But let's just start with this concept. You know, happiness is something that's occupied the human mind, well, since there's been humans. We have been looking at it. Doesn't matter what culture you go into, what philosopher you read, what religious group you see, this is a constant concept. It is something that Aristotle wrote about. It's something Plato wrote about. It's something that different Stoic writers and so forth, Marcus Aurelius and so forth, wrote about. It is just something that we're consumed with. It's so much so that even in our founding documents here, it's in the Declaration of Independence, the pursuit of happiness. But, I mean, that's really hard to define, isn't it? So the idea in the writing of that was that, you know, the colonies were enslaved under taxation to the British Empire and to the crown, and there was no choice, there was no freedom to choose, and so eventually they rebel, right? And they write in part of this declaration that we want to be able to be free to pursue happiness. And of course, I think that's what mankind's always wanted. But without any kind of direction on that, the pursuit of happiness has led to a lot of unhappy people. A lot of things that have prescribed to be happy or bring happiness have simply not brought it. And we know that. You don't need me to tell you that. That's something that we experience universally together. The difficulty is we believe we understand it. We believe we understand what happiness is or what it's going to take to be happy, and we believe that. And we've actually talked about this a few times in the past couple of weeks. You know, we get this idea that if we just get to the next hurdle, the next rung on the ladder, for a younger generation, if we just level up, we're going to be happier. And I'm not saying they're completely unrelated. You know, when me and Tiffany first got married, I wouldn't want to live in that apartment again. I'm just going to be honest with you. And the vehicles we drove were in pretty poor shape, and we still found happiness. But there is a sense of, you know, kind of coming up as far as ability and finance and so forth that does bring some level of enjoyment to life, but it is not the answer to happiness. It's not really the answer to happiness. There's a lot of miserable rich people in this world because they're trying to find what we're going to talk about tonight in the wrong places. There's a quote that you've probably heard this quote before, but I want you to look at it with me and see what you think of it. I'll tell you who said this here in a minute, but the quote is, when I was 5 years old, my mother always told me that happiness was the key to life. When I went to school, you remember in 5th grade, 5 years old, kindergarten, what are you going to be? And you have, everybody wants to be a cowboy or a fireman or an astronaut or, picked on Timothy several times, and he mentioned it when he came and spoke. For the longest time, 4 years old, 5 years old, he went to work at the McDonald's drive-thru. That was his goal in life. I'm like, well, at least aiming where you can hit, but, that's not exactly where we want to go. But he said, when I was 5 years old, my mother always told me that happiness was the key to life. When I went to school, they asked me what I wanted to be when I grew up, and I wrote down happy. And they told me I didn't understand the assignment. I told them they didn't understand life. It's a great quote. That quote is actually by John Lennon. one of the most miserable people that you ever come across, especially in the latter part of his life. As he went out and pursued life and happiness, all he found was more tragedy and trauma, and of course we know eventually he was even assassinated. But the idea that he thought he understood happiness, right? And he flipped it, and we might find it funny, and we might agree with a lot of what he said. That I want to be happy, that's true. And I've seen this, and I've heard this, and I've seen it in marriages that are struggling. Well, God would want me to be happy. And I've heard, people doing things, it makes me happy, that's why I should do it. And that, it's empty. It does not bring around true happiness. Now, misery is not the goal here, but something else has to be if we really want to be happy. And that's going to be what we hopefully see together tonight as we dive into a couple things. We're going to be turning to Matthew chapter 5, if you want to be turning there. But on the way, happiness is not walking after the ways of man. Happiness is not found in the ways of man. They're going all the way back to the psalmist. Blessed is the man who walks not in the counsel of the ungodly. That word blessed in both the Hebrew and the Greek. So no matter if we go back to the Hebrew version of the Psalms, or we go back to the Septuagint, which was the Greek translation that existed in Jesus' day, that word means truly happy. Truly happy is a man who walks not in the counsel of the ungodly, nor stands in the path of sinners, nor sits in the seat of the scornful. This is the ways of the world that we've been talking about some other things too. It does not lead to happiness. It might momentarily lead to some joy, with a lot of regret and a lot of second thought and so forth afterwards. That's not happiness. I use the example of David. I think he's one that we can relate to. I think he's a story everybody knows. He was God's man. He was the man after God's own heart. That's what it said about him, right? He was the giant slayer. What took David down? Are we being bashful, or we not know? Lust. Okay. He's where he's not supposed to be. The armies are out in the field and on the battlefield, and he normally would have been with them, but instead he was back in the palace. So he starts off not where he's supposed to be. There's Bathsheba bathing. I don't know if that was completely in innocence and he just saw her, or if I don't know, but he saw her nonetheless. And what did it lead to? I don't mean to be crass here or whatever. For a moment, I'm sure he enjoyed his decision, but it was a very small moment compared to all the misery that came after it. After that, what ended up happening? He finds himself lying. He finds himself scheming. He finds himself Uriah. Do we know who Uriah was, besides Bathsheba's husband?
He was one of the military leaders.
Yeah, well, he was one of David's mighty men. He was one of the men he was a Hittite. He wasn't even a Jew, who had followed David all those years he was running from Saul. And all those years he was trying to make it. He's one of the three men that when David is standing there and the Philistines have a garrison at one of his places they used to take the sheep, and he longed to have a glass of water from that well. He's one of the three who crossed enemy lines and went and got it. Her father-in-law was one of his chief advisors. That moment of joy that he might have experienced was just an entrance to a mountain of grief. He has a child by that incident. What happens to him? Huh? Not this one.
Oh, dies.
Yeah, this one dies. And he knows it's directly because of what? What kind of joy is that? This is what the world sells us, is this idea that these momentary things are worth it. And these ideas of some kind of it's like junk food to the mind. It's like junk food to the soul. And it's not fulfilling. It's not lasting. It is not going to bring us true happiness. we're not going to be blessed. Okay? So how then can we be blessed? I asked you to turn to Matthew chapter 5, and that's where we're going to be. And this is the beginning of the Sermon on the Mount. And I'm sure that you all have studied these many times before. You've looked at them. We call them the first section here. What are they often known as?
Beatitudes.
The Beatitudes. Which means what? The attitude you should be. No, it's the character you should have, right? I like the idea, and maybe I'm making more of this, but in this huge sermon that Jesus is going to preach, and everybody wants to know about doctrine and about kingdoms and all this, he starts with character. So in the bulletin, Tiffany used an article I wrote a while back that it still matters. Character still matters. Well, what do we find here when we look at this? According to Jesus, happiness is the fruit of character, of disposition, and action. And this is what I want to put just in front of us before we look at it. It's the fruit of. Now, watch what I mean. Look here at Matthew chapter 5, the first few verses. And seeing the multitudes, he went up on a mountain. And when he was seated, his disciples came to him. And then he opened his mouth and taught them, saying, Blessed are the poor in spirit, for theirs is the kingdom of heaven. Blessed are those who mourn, for they shall be comforted. Blessed are the meek, for they shall inherit the earth. Blessed are those who hunger and thirst for righteousness, for they shall be filled. Blessed are the merciful, for they shall obtain mercy. Blessed are the pure in heart, for they shall see God. Blessed are the peacemakers, for they shall be called sons of God. Blessed are those who are persecuted for righteousness' sake, for theirs is the kingdom of heaven. And of course, he's going to go on and say, Blessed are you when they revile and persecute you and say all kinds of evil against you. Truly happy are the ones who what? Are the ones who are poor in spirit. Truly happy are those who mourn. And that seems crazy. Mourn over what? Mourn over those who have lost? Yes, I believe that's part of this. But mourn as God mourns. Does God just mourn over the death of loved ones? What does he mourn over?
Lost souls.
Lost souls, sin.
We're in distress, God worries about us.
Yeah. Okay? So truly happy are those who mourn. Truly happy are the meek. Truly happy are those who hunger or thirst for righteousness. I'm getting tongue-tied tonight. Truly happy are the merciful. What are we seeing here? It is something that is... It's kind of subtle if you're not paying attention to it, because we get caught up in the idea of meekness and what is that and so forth, and we miss the first part. But the pursuit of happiness is not found in pursuing happiness. It's found in pursuing something else. And we find ourselves experiencing happiness. There are moments in your life, no doubt, that you planned a big vacation, maybe you planned a big event, and you got there and you enjoyed it immensely, and you went home. And there's probably times that you did all that work, and you got there, and it was like one of those tales of everything that could go wrong went wrong. Right? Can you all relate to that? And then there are just moments, whether they were on a planned vacation or they weren't, or they were in the still moments of your life that you look back and you were truly happy in that memory. And they're not anything that was created that you were seeking happiness, but you found it in that moment. That's just a small piece of what we're talking about here. Happiness is more of a fruit than it is something you're pursuing. I mean, I'm not saying you should pursue not being happy. That's not what we're saying. But if we pursue meekness, and if we pursue being a peacemaker, and if we pursue these things that God says, we're going to be truly happy or blessed. Does that mean in every moment? No. The happiness and the joy that God talks about is not this fake, phony happiness that we often see. And I'm going to tell you that social media has made this worse. Social media, and I'm on it. I'm not trying to be a hypocrite here. I'm just trying to be real and trying to be honest with you. And those who use it, you know this is true. If you're on Instagram or, I'm an old person, so I'm on Facebook, right? If you're on any of these, you take pictures and you put them all up, right? No, which ones do you put up? Oh, come on. Yeah, the good ones. I'll put the one up. I'm going to put the one that magically makes me look 20 pounds lighter. I know I'm not. But I'm going to put that one up. I'm not going to put up the one that looks real. You're going to have the family thing. You ever did the family beach photo? I mean, we did that years ago. I'm not trying to decry it or anything like that. And ours went pretty well. But there's so many stories. I know a family that talks about this because they had some rambunctious youngins that they had adopted very, very young. And they're just all boy. They climb and carry on and fight and I can tell you some stories, but they're a handful, and they're pulling their hair out, and they're trying to get that. And it's like an hour trying to get one picture, and there they are, just smiling as the perfect family in the picture. Well, what's really happening? They're like, "Why did we ever do this?" In that moment, there's been a lot of threatening. Lives have been put on. What am I getting at? We get so much phony happiness presented to us, and then we feel like that's what we need in order for us to be happy. So we're pursuing something that's what? Not even real. And yet God gives us something that's real. The pursuit of happiness is not found in pursuing happiness. Where would we even go in that? The things that brought you happiness when you were 4 years old aren't the same things that probably bring you happiness now, except for ice cream. That does, usually does it. But you probably, if you watch TV when you were younger, you probably don't watch the same shows. I don't know. I can watch Looney Tunes every once in a while, but that's really not on my schedule now. Now, some of you all got little ones. You got no choice. It's Bluey or nothing probably for you all. But he's even got the shirt on. Grandpa right there. All right. But you know what I'm saying? Things that used to make you happy don't necessarily always make you happy. I still do. I love Italian food. That's why I look the way I do. I'm trying to break it, but it's really hard. It's really deeply ingrained. I love pasta. I love lasagna. I grew up when my grandmother just cooked Italian food all the time, and she's the best cook that I've ever met, and all that. And it's just ingrained in my brain. This is happiness when I eat that lasagna. But you know what? The second day I have that same lasagna, it's not quite as good. And if you've been in a house where you get a lot of leftovers and you're a leftover kind of family, the third day, it's not as good as the first day. And it's not necessarily that the quality of the lasagna went down. It's that it just doesn't bring as much joy as the first time I had it. And this is the reality of our world, and yet this is what we're pursuing. This is what we're telling our kids. Think about it. Some people, my kids are in that age. They're in college, and one's getting married. I've got a senior, all this in this age, trying to figure out what you want to be and what you want to do in this world and how you want to live. And you're trying to navigate, and in their mind, they want to be happy. So what is the world telling them they need to do? Make money. Okay. Do we need money? It's going to be really hard to make it in this world without money. I want to share a story with you, and you all make whatever you want to of it. This is shared by a friend of mine. His name is Joey Harbison. I don't know where he got it from. I'm just telling you it's not original with me, okay? So the story goes like this. There's, when we had what would you call it? The mechanical revolution, well, that's not the right word, the industrial revolution, and we started moving and building stuff and being able to get around the world quicker with engines and steam engines and coal engines and then eventually gas engines and all this. We broke into new markets in South America and Asia and so forth. Well, there were some businessmen who went to Asia, and I can't remember if it was Indonesia or if it was one of these island areas just south of there, and they're fishermen. And they were talking to one of the locals there who was a fisherman by trade who took care of his family. And they were trying to express to them, obviously, they were business people and they wanted to make more money, and they were trying to share with them how to make more money. And they were talking to this gentleman, and they were like, well, how's your day go? Well, I get up, I go fishing for a few hours, I bring in enough to take care of my family, and then, the rest of the day, I do whatever I need to around the house, and I might take a couple days to do this or that. And he's like, well, that's not very efficient. What you should do is you should work more hours so you can bring in more fish so you can sell them. And it's like, well, why should I do that? Because you'll produce more revenue, and then you could buy another boat. And so, well, why would I do that? So that you can, hire someone else to run that boat, and so you can bring in more revenue. And he's like, okay, so why do that? And this goes on and on until he's got him creating this little enterprise. And then he says, okay, and why? So that you can be off on the days you want to be off on, which is exactly what he was doing to start with. There's a lot of things that are good but get distorted. That's true in every aspect of life. The world takes good things and they distort them and make them bad things. Marriage, love. And we talked about, what happened with David. Even the idea, of sex and things like that God meant for good, the world distorts it. Taking care of your family and does God ask us to do that? Absolutely. Paul says a man who's not, and he means someone who's able, who doesn't take care of his own family is worse than what?
Infidel.
An infidel. Does God want us to work? Sure. In the garden, before there was sin, there was, guess what? A job. Besides to multiply and fill the earth, what else were they given? Tend the garden. Now, that probably was an easy job because there was no weeds or thistles or anything to deal with, but they still had a responsibility, a job. But sometimes we get so mixed up that we think, well, I've got to make so much money in order to be happy. I've got to have so many things in order to be happy.
Money and things don't make you happy.
They don't. Now again, there's the threshold. If you're starving every day and all of a sudden you have enough money to feed yourself, that's a difference. But when we're just moving around fancy things for fancier things, thinking that they're going to make us happy, we're going to be left unhappy. Again, I want to turn us to what Jesus is saying. Instead of pursuing happiness, happiness is found in pursuing the character and ways of Jesus, hence the pursuit, what we were talking about last month, of holiness. You think, whoa. How could you be happy if it leads to you being persecuted? We have a very small window on reality of eternity, don't we? We are fixed on this moment, and maybe we can imagine a little bit ahead of ourselves, but we're really fixed on this moment. This is something we do in counseling a lot, or especially the way I approach things, because we get so fixed in the moment, good, bad, or otherwise. So someone who's having a really bad moment, really bad time, they get fixed and they feel like this moment is going to last forever because that's all they can see. So we try to get them out of that looking forward. And I usually use like 6 weeks. Okay, what could 6 weeks from now look like? And then if we can get them to imagine that, then we start imagining steps to get there. Now, what does that have to do with this here? Well, when we think of character, we think of holiness, we're thinking about ultimately the image of Christ and our eternity with Him. So the steps that take to get there are the ones we're walking now. Were there times you think that the apostles, as they walked with Jesus, had really hard days? I think so. We looked at the Mount Transfiguration not long ago, and if you remember, the three went up with Jesus. The rest were down in the valley, and it said they had not slept. They had been dealing with the people the whole time. They walked everywhere they went. They often went without. And, they were tired. I know there had been days that were really hard. Were there some days that were really, really amazing? Oh, come on. Had you been? Y'all seen the movie The Incredibles? Okay, I got a few. All right, that movie rocks, by the way. I mean, I'll watch that movie again right now. The second one, first one, though, rocks. Anyways, this is a cartoon movie by Pixar, right? Anyway, and you got this superhero family, right? Because that's realistic. But you have this superhero family that they've been busting crime and all this, but you keep getting blamed for, other things happening, and they have to go and hide it. So they're trying to play off this, this middle-income family living in the suburbs, had the whole, Wonder Years picture, if you remember that show, going on. He's a salesman, driving a little car, he's this big old guy, he has to get out of the car. And, something happens, the villain shows up, and there's this, scrap there, and there's a little boy that's the neighbor, remember, on his little tricycle? And he blows the bubble when it pops, the whole scene. And then the next day he pulls up and he's sitting out there and he pulls up in a little car and he comes out and he looks at him and says, what are you looking at, or what are you waiting for? He said, something amazing, I guess. I love that line. There are moments that are just amazing. I'm sure there were moments that are just amazing with these disciples, and I'm sure there were days that were just waiting for something amazing. And there were days that they were deeply sorrowful and grieving. I can't imagine how they must have felt when Jesus was actually crucified. Never mind the fact that their friend had been put to death. Their own lack of faith in the moment had to have broken them. I know it did Peter. The whole idea that they gave themselves to this man, son of God though, for 3 years, and now he's gone. But how they must have felt when they left this world and saw all the work that they did, and all the work that Christ did, and all the souls that they touched. That's happiness this world cannot provide. That's long-lasting joy. That is blessedness. It's not found in pursuing what the world says to pursue. Again, I like having nice things. I'm not going to lie. I'm not going to pretend like, hey, I got an opportunity to have a nice vehicle, or I can drive this old clunker. I've drove many old clunkers. I'd rather have the nice vehicle. But what am I willing to give up to have it? If I have to give up things that are more important, then I'm going to drive the clunker. That's hard. The question, though, is, what am I pursuing? What are you pursuing? There are no shortcuts. Here's the other one, the last one that we'll kind of look at together. There are no shortcuts to happiness, to true happiness. And again, this is what the world preaches. And we even do it spiritually, or as a human race. You see this, I don't know if it's popular because I don't watch this stuff. I used to, turn on every once in a while just to hear what was kind of being preached and so forth. And I heard a lot of things on these televangelist things, and all it usually ends up being is what?
Send me money.
If you send me money, you're going to be blessed. We got in the mail at the church, this is probably 20 years ago, a thing, and it was a piece of fabric, and they sent it to the church, not to me, not to Tiffany, but to the church, and they were asking for a donation. And so we sent in this donation. They were going to send this piece of fabric was to be there as a sample, a prayer pillow, to us. And I'm saying, oh, okay, we're going to get a prayer pillow, and this is going to be sent to us. And they were only asking for a donation of $100 to $1,000. And this prayer pillow will help us to bring about all the things that we wanted in life. How many people sent in money?
Bunches.
No telling. That's why they're on TV. That's why what was it? One of them took some flack over the cost of he was trying to raise from his parishioners there to buy him a new plane because, he couldn't fly commercial. I mean, I'm not trying to run people down or try to just use an easy, low-hanging fruit for this. But what I'm saying is, the reason why they're there is the people underneath them, what are they trying to receive? What are they trying to be? Happy. And sometimes we think there's a shortcut. It's not just religion, though. We have it in other things, too. The whole pyramid schemes that go about, buy into this and you're going to end up being a millionaire. And I see it all the time, on social media, on the internet. I spend a lot of time on that for various things. And you see, a little 30-minute clip. I've got this new program that'll make you $100,000 a year and so forth, or $100,000 a month. And I'm thinking, wow, they're really going crazy. All right. And the truth is who's going to make $100,000? Yeah, the person selling it, not you. But why does it work? Because people want a shortcut. Life's hard. I've had this running joke with my wife that when I go, I don't do it as much because I've just gotten tired. But I used to make a joke every time I went to the mailbox that it wasn't in there. I've been saying, of all the millionaires, billionaires, whatever in this world, surely one of them could afford to send me $1 million check. I think so. So every day, every time I go to the mailbox, I see if someone happened to send me one, and so I'm sending one. And if you are among those and you want to send me a check, go ahead. But the reality is there's no get rich quick schemes out there. There's no shortcuts to happiness. And you know what ends up happening? And I'm not for gambling, so don't take this the wrong way. You see this happen. The people who do gamble, like on the lottery, and they win, you know what happens to most of those people? They go broke. Here's not only the thing that they lose everything they win, they end up in worse financial shape than when they started. There are no shortcuts. I don't know if you're much of a movie person, and we're going to talk about the fruit of the Spirit here to end, but there's a movie, and it may not be in your genre field, and that's okay. I'm not trying to get you to watch a movie. I just use it as an example. It's called Ip Man. You're like, what's that? Well, it's a Chinese kind of kung fu master who was the one who trained Bruce Lee. And then they made, I don't know how many movies out of that, and I'm sure they took some poetic license to make it more, theatrical and so forth. And it's got Donnie Lee, or I think his name is, anyway. And throughout this thing, the tragedy keeps befalling him. Like he loses his studio, he loses his house, he loses whatever, and he just gets up and keeps going. And he's never, and I'm not trying to say, that we can avoid depression and all that. I'm not trying to say that. But he never seems to show it. And he had found something. He found a reality, and I know it's a movie, but it's based on a true story, a true person's life. He had found, now we would disagree with what he found it in, but he found something bigger than himself. And his way of life was his anchor, not only his anchor, but how he found joy in hardship. And that's what we're talking about. That's what Jesus is talking about. If you're going to be God's people, if you're going to pursue the things of God, you're going to have the things of God. We don't have time to develop the fruit of the Spirit. So instead, let's go back to Galatians chapter 5, or Galatians 5, that's what the fruit of the Spirit. Matthew 5, and look at something with me in these statements of blessed are. Truly happy are those who have this characteristic, and yet they receive, and watch, the things of God. Blessed are the poor in spirit, for theirs is the kingdom of heaven. Blessed are those who mourn, for they shall be comforted. The only one who can truly comfort is God. Blessed are the meek, for they shall inherit the earth. Blessed are those who hunger and thirst for righteousness, for they shall be filled. Blessed are the merciful, for they shall obtain mercy. The only one that can extend it. Blessed are the pure in heart, for they shall see God. Blessed are the peacemakers, for they shall be called sons of God. And then we end up again on the kingdom of heaven. there's a lot of things that we can talk about as far as happiness. And again, I'm not trying to say that we abandon all material things. That doesn't necessarily lead to happiness. But if we think that they're going to bring us happiness, we need to be careful. Make sure that we're not filling an empty place within us with things. There is a really important lesson, I think, in all of this. How did Jesus live his life? We don't know until he's 30. What I mean by that, we know he was righteous, we know he was sinless, we know that he worshiped the Father and so forth. How many things did he own? What was his yearly take-home income? We don't know. Probably good that we don't, because people would pick it apart for something. But he lived life just like we do. I don't think he went around the whole time never charging anybody for work that was done in the shop, or never trading for one thing to another, or never, looking for a good meal and always turning it down for a bad meal. I don't think that's what he was doing. But he was pursuing something greater. And that's really the heart of this. If we want to really be happy and find happiness, we've got to pursue something that's greater. We've got to pursue the holiness of God. I appreciate your all's listening tonight. I didn't give you as much time to speak and interject. I hope that maybe I can do that more next time. But, if you are here tonight and we can, you are here, though, aren't you? That's a weird statement for me to make. If you're here tonight. I guess you could be somewhere else in your mind. Maybe you are. But you're here tonight. If you have need, that's what I mean to say. We're here to help. And if there's someone who needs to obey the gospel tonight, we, of course, want to have that opportunity before you. If there's someone who needs prayers, or maybe some other way that we can be of help, we pray that you'll make those needs be known as we sing a song of invitation.